Now we're going to apply the piping to the front, the top and the bottom panel of the large section, the cushion section. And you want to choose a place to start applying the piping where it's not going to show. You want to make sure that you haven't chosen the front of the cushion to put to start the piping. So I'm going to start a little bit in the back. This is the back of my cushion, and I'm going to start sort of in the middle on the back, and that's where I want it to be. So you lay your piping on the edge of the fabric with the bump part on the inside and the seam allowances lined up with the edge of the fabric. And when you begin, you want to just bend the piping off of that seam allowance so that it just kind of bends off like that. And then when the other piece comes in, we're going to overlap, and you won't notice the starting and the stopping there. So I'll show you that closer later. We need to switch to a zipper foot and move your needle position if you need to. And we're just going to be basting this in place because we will be sewing the side panel on, and then you'll sew it with a regular stitch. So at this point, we're just basting the piping onto the panel. Now we're going to baste the piping onto the edge of the large panel of the seat cover. And I'm starting with sort of bending my the piping off the edge a little, but the seam allowance is over here. So you see I'm going to sew over it while it's sort of bent down out of the way. Okay, let me just see, this thread is in the way. Okay, and now I went over the bend, and now my piping is lined up with the edge of the fabric, and the zipper foot is running right along the bump of the piping, and just so we're basting it on. Now here is the pivot point that we're going to turn at the corner. So we want to just sew down to here, which will be 5/8 inch from the edge there. And I'll kind of mark that for you so you can see right here is going to be our pivot point. Now you can take a snip, and don't cut too far, but just a little bit of a snip to help that bend around the corner. So right up to the pivot point, and you can go back just to secure it a little bit, and then put the needle in that pivot point, turn your fabric, and then you just turn your piping like this. So you almost like fold it. Make sure that the piping is out of the way of the needle so you don't sew over it. Put your foot back down, and again, line up the edge of the seam allowance, the piping seam allowance, with the edge of the fabric, and continue down the edge of the piping bead. Now when you've come around to the back to where you started, you see that I have this, the beginning of the piping is kind of bent off, or kind of merges off of the fabric. If you want, you can trim that to match the edge of this fabric so you don't get confused. And then this piece is going to do the same thing. It's going to kind of cross over on top and then come down. Now if you'd like, you can pin it in place right here while you're sewing, just so it doesn't move. And then continue that, and there'll be just a slight overlap right here. And then sew right on top of that. We're coming to our overlap section, and you just sew right over the overlap and continue down a little bit further, and then go back and forth a little bit just to knot that. We'll remove that pin. Now I've sewn my piping in a continuous line, so now I'm just going to cut off that amount. And there is our first top panel. You see how nice the piping gives it a nice shape. Now you want to do the exact same thing, repeat the exact same process with the bottom panel so that you have piping on both the top panel and the bottom panel.